Everyone, welcome to another episode. Today we are joined by Zach from SpecRight. He is a former CPG founder and now he is in sales at SpecRight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jessie. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So today we're going to talk about EPR and we're going to discuss what it's about, why it's important, why people need to care about it, how it's going to impact their business, and how to proceed. And so I know you know a lot about EPR, and so we're going to talk all about those details now. So thank you. Let's dive right in and talk about what EPR is and why it's important.
Yeah, so EPR stands for Extended Producer Responsibility. And what it is it's basically a way of shifting the financial burden of disposal and recycling of packaging material from the government to the companies that produce and sell that packaging. So whether it's like a producer of packaging or like a brand like Nestle or Amazon or et cetera, et cetera. And fundamentally, it's basically taking all those costs that the government pays for recycling and disposal, and the government works with a producer responsibility organization, and that company or organization figures out essentially how much each company is responsible to pay for the recycling and disposal of all that waste.
And is that based on material type and weight and different data around what they're using?
Yeah, so each state has a slightly different setup on the different materials that are covered under EPR. So it does vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
I was just wondering if, as we think about how companies are registering with their different materials, is it kind of proportionate? Are the responsibilities distributed evenly, or like who's using more materials or whatever?
Yes. So the producer responsibility organization, one of their main jobs is to take the total cost. So let's say it's $1 billion for all, let's say in California it costs $1 billion for recycling and disposal, right? Obviously it's way more than that, but let's just say what they would do is they would look at the data from all the companies that sell and produce in California, and they would say, hey, you know what? Company A does 50%, let's say Nestle, right? They're huge, right? Maybe Nestle is responsible for 50% of all that packaging. So they have to pay 50% of the cost of that system.
Yeah. Do you think they're going to rank by if it's plastic? Is it like a point system where they give different ratings or rankings to different materials? And then do they consider the weight then and then calculate? Or do you know how the calculation works?
Yeah. So it is based on the type of material that you're using, as well as how much you're using. So if a company is, maybe using like thinner plastic, or they're down weighting a lot of their packaging, right? Then they're not going to be using as much. There's also a concept of eco-modulation, where if a company has shown historically that they're moving towards more sustainable material and they're going to continue to do that, then the pro can actually assign them less fees because they have a smaller environmental footprint.
Okay, sure. That makes sense. So depending on the materials that different companies are using, that's going to kind of inform what their fees are. And then you were saying also that it kind of varies by jurisdiction. So there's a few states right now that are requiring EPR reporting, or they intend to. Can you say anything about the states that are currently moving toward EPR and any kind of dates around implementation? Because there's the reporting piece, but then there's also before that tracking and kind of registering, getting set up. So maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah. So the Producer Responsibility Organization for California, Oregon, Colorado, and Maryland is an organization called Circular Action Alliance, and it was founded by 20 of the largest CPG brands like Amazon, Nestle, P&G, etc. And they have a July 1st deadline to register for all the states, and that way they can start to collect the data and then figure out how much companies are going to have to pay. In terms of like when companies actually have to start paying, the first bill from Oregon goes out July 1st of 2025.
Okay.
So like pretty soon. California actually doesn't go, I think the first bill is actually in 2027. However, there's additional actual like reporting deadlines for your data, I believe starting in 2025. It's really advantageous to start reporting for a company, because then if you show in 2026 that you're moving towards more sustainable materials, then your fee in 2027 could actually be lower, versus if you're not reporting, then CAA doesn't have any data to make a determination on what your fee should be. Maybe it should be lower, but they can't say that because they don't have your data.
Yeah, because you never reported. Okay, so then one more question about fees, and then I want to move on to talking about the pro. So would organizations expect different bills from different states, or are they all consolidated through a pro? What does that look like?
So each state is going to have their own bill. It's because that there's different covered materials in each state. So like California has 99 covered materials. Also, the percentage that the companies are expected to pay of the disposal varies by state, and I don't have a lot of details on that. And like in 2032, it goes up to them paying 90% of that system. In California, there's the paying of this system, but then there's also a $500 billion education fund on top of that, and so that's $500 billion over the next 10 years.
Yeah, it sounds very complicated.
It is.
How does a pro work, and how can they kind of help with this whole process?
So a pro is the company that actually, well, it's a nonprofit in this case, but they're the ones that actually implement the law. So like most legislation is implemented by the government. Mm-hmm. In this case, the Pro Circular Action Alliance, they're implementing the law, but they're obviously not the government. So they're responsible for collecting the data, for determining the fees, for levying fines, like if there's non compliance. Mm-hmm. And so that's their role. So this is technically not a tax, although, it's a tax.
Well, it makes you wonder too, like if they're moving the funding from the government and pushing it onto the companies, will their taxes go down?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay. So then what does it mean to register for a pro? And then who should be thinking about doing that? I know I've talked to a lot of different people, and this is not on anybody's radar. And so is there a size of company that should consider registering? What does it mean to register with a pro? How do you do it? What should people expect?
So you can register on the CAA website, which I'm sure we'll put in the notes here. And there is definitely going to be I shouldn't say that. I don't speak for CAA, but my understanding from reading the laws and just kind of my general understanding is that there will be a certain like revenue size where if you're below, like you won't have to pay into this. However, if you produce packaging, if you distribute packaging, if you're a brand, like you should at least register, because you don't want to be caught flat-footed. Worst case is you register, they have your information, and they say, hey, you actually don't need to pay into this. But if you're producing packaging, distributing, or you're a brand, like it's probably best to just go ahead and register on their website.
Okay. So then say a little more about that, because if you're a producer, are you also paying this fee even though your product gets converted into a finished good? And then is that finished good producer also paying a fee? Like, are there fees for everybody?
No. So I think there's some of the details are still pretty murky on this, like who has to pay where. However, the concept behind it is you only pay once. So
okay.
Each piece of packaging, only one entity pays.
Okay.
So it obviously gets complicated if you're a brand, like if your warehouse, let's say, is in California, but then it gets sold in Colorado, but you don't know. Like sometimes it's hard to track where that product actually goes.
Yes.
And those are some of the details that are still being worked out. Again, which is one of the reasons why you want to register, is to get these updates as they become available. Like they're still working through the rulemaking process.
Sure. So if you're a producer and your manufacturing is in, I don't know, Iowa, they don't get much attention, but you're selling a certain percentage in California, then you would only be responsible for paying that EPR fee for the state of California. So yeah, you're going to have to really track where your product goes, which I could see being very tricky because a lot of manufacturers will just ship to their customer and then they may not know where their customer is shipping that to which warehouse. So
yeah, I think it's in Canada that they, instead of you having to know exactly where your products end up, which is sometimes like not even possible.
Yeah.
Without like extreme measures, they actually do it based on like population size. So you say, hey, you know what, like, we do $100 million in revenue, and California is like, 10% of the country. So we'll assume that like 10% was done in California. Like, so there's a few different ways that other countries have gone about it, but again, that's part of the process that's still being figured out, and that's also one of the advantages of having CAA right now being the only pro. Is it's easier to coordinate with one organization that can just kind of have the same can implement to the extent possible the same thing across all states. So It's almost like de facto federal legislation, to the extent that's possible. Obviously, each state is different, but at least you're only dealing with one organization.
Okay, so when people go to register at CAA, then do they expect to have somebody to talk to, or do you think it's all pretty entering fields? Because I think it isn't a very easy thing to learn about. Like if you want to do it right and you want to go register.
Yeah. So right now it's just like you enter in your data. They also have producer working groups every month that are only for producers. So I think to their credit, I think they're doing what they can with the information they have available right now, but there is still a lot that is truly unknown. Like it's not, I don't think CAA is like, they're not like intentionally holding back information. It's just the state of California in association with CAA and, industry groups are still working through the rules of the law,
There's a lot moving around and nothing is for certain yet, but getting registered means that you are along for the ride versus coming up short when you have to start reporting. Okay. So let's talk about packaging data, because one of the things you and I have talked about is packaging impacts every area of the business, from procurement to operations, quality, distribution. But oftentimes issues with packaging or packaging in general doesn't rank very high because it's spread out and the impact is spread out across the organization. That most leaders have KPI that are a lot, that rank a lot higher than giving attention to packaging. Organizations are really used to tracking ingredients, so they kind of understand how to track materials, but packaging is kind of an afterthought for a lot of companies. And so most ERP systems that I've seen, and you can speak to this, do not have a robust packaging module. It might be something tied to procurement or a BOM, but it's really not giving you the data around exactly what materials, what layers are in the film, how thick it is, how much the carton weighs, those types of things. And programs like EPR are going to start impacting folks that don't have their data. So maybe you can speak on that a little.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective at SpecRight, and I, as just also like a brand owner, packaging historically it's been kind of an afterthought. It's like, it's just the thing, and I'm going to credit you, Jessie, on this one. It's like, it's just the thing your product goes in. And I think for a lot of reasons, like, I understand why people have thought that for a long time. Like,
I agree.
Packaging was super cheap. It, you wanted to like look nice, like the brand was important, but after that, like it almost, for a lot of times, it almost like didn't really matter. Like there's not like a lot of sustainability things. People just wanted their product, they wanted to eat it, and they threw away the packaging in it, and that was it. But now with obviously like sustainability, people obviously really care about that. It's becoming much more important. But now there's also not just the carrot of sustainability. Now there's also the stick. of EPR. And because of the way that these laws are written, your fee could be, could be a lot, but if you show you're more sustainable, it actually could be a little bit. And so now I actually really think that packaging is going to start to rise to the level of the CFO, because this is, it's not technically a tax, but it's
a fee to manage.
It's a fee to manage, and it's a fee that you can reduce. And so, through from some of my friends that are kind of in the EPR space that do a lot of work in Europe, these are super rough numbers, but they said sometimes the EPR fee can be 1 to 4% of revenue. So, now, I'm not saying that's what's going to be in the US because I have no idea, but that's it's not an insignificant number.
Right. 1%, even if it's conservative.
That's
right.
That it could be a very big number for some companies.
Yeah.
And so if you can get that to 0.5% by being more sustainable, while your consumers are also going to be pretty happy about that, that's a huge win. But you can only do that if you have your data.
What should data look like? Because I know a lot of PDFs and Word documents and just random things. So what does good data look like if we're going to prep data to leverage it for EPR? And also, there's so much more about data that we are not covering now that you can leverage for your business, but specifically EPR. Maybe you could speak on that.
Yeah. So really the way that we think about this is your data should be, this is going to sound really obvious, but usable. Okay. So when I say usable, I mean in a database where you can ask it questions, you can run reports based on certain fields, and you're not reliant. The opposite of usable is PDFs, Word, and Excel. Excel is more usable than PDF and Word, but it's not as good as a database.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'll actually just give a story. I was working with a client. They were coming out, or they're developing packaging, and that's supposed to be 100% recyclable. I'm sorry, 100% plastic free.
Okay.
And they almost released it with plastic in it. Now, that was not the intention. What happened was, in the adhesive from the supplier, there was a piece of plastic in the adhesive.
Sure.
And so, but the supplier told them, yeah, we just, we use adhesive. And then in a supporting PDF, it gave details of the adhesive, which had the piece of plastic.
It was polymer based.
So that is not usable, right?
Right.
Yes, they caught it, thank God, but they almost did it. And so that is an example of non-usable data, because it's so easy to miss something when it's in a static document in someone's email.
Yeah. What does a good database look like? I know you said you can leverage the information, but how do you get from 500 PDFs to a usable database?
Well, you hire a group of interns from your local university.
Okay.
No, at SpecRight, there's ways to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
SpecRight is a purpose-built platform for your specs.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of most of our clients will start with their packaging specs, but regardless of the system you use, the initial data upload can obviously be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But there's things like intelligent document processing. You can actually put a lot of your data or a lot of your documents into ChatGPT, and it'll take out the data. Now there's security concerns with that, of course, but
Sure.
But there's a lot of technology that you can use like that, or just humans to take out the data and put it into something like SpecRight or another platform.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. All right, what have we left off? We got everything. EPR is coming, and if you haven't consolidated your packaging into a spreadsheet or a database, either one could be used to do the necessary EPR inputs, then you need to start thinking about that now. And each state is going to have a little bit different plan. So far, there's 5 of them that have passed legislation.
Yeah, so California, Colorado, Oregon are the main 3. Maryland has passed one. Minnesota just passed one. Maine is like on its way, but it's probably going to be a few years. So there's like
Okay.
3 with like another 3, but it'll probably be nationwide within
Yeah.
10 years, 15 years. Like this is
Kind of
just the way it's going.
would have been nice if it was just nationwide to begin with, so it wasn't so much all over the place.
It's never going to
Um,
happen in
right.
in America.
Yeah, it's true. Anyway, so the first step people should consider is registering with the pro. And you can do that right on their website, the Circular Action Alliance, so CAA, and kind of start that ball rolling so that your organization isn't caught at the very end when it's just kind of a disaster. And then as you ramp up, you can start collecting your information and getting it into a usable database or spreadsheet so that it can be leveraged. And again, the power in that is minimizing fees and then also leveraging that for future opportunities to reduce fees, even to save money on what you're currently doing. If you don't know you have 12 different sizes of cartons, then that's a problem because maybe you only need 3 and that would save you money.
Yeah, I mean, I would say step 1A is getting your packaging data organized, right? Regardless of EPR. Like if you're
Yes.
if you're not owning your data and you're not controlling your data, like you're missing out on an opportunity to truly understand your products, right? Because your product is not just the ingredient, the food, the laptop, whatever. Like packaging is a significant portion of the business, and if you're not understanding your data, then you're missing out on opportunities. Whether, to your point, whether it's consolidation, whether it's minimization or lightweighting of your materials. A lot of our clients come to us because their procurement, just like interfacing with suppliers, can be a challenge. Like if you don't have, I've talked to a lot of food companies that have problems with quality because they don't have like an approved spec. And so what happens if their supplier will send them data or will send them something, whether it's packaging or an ingredient, and they're like, well, this wasn't the right thing, but they didn't have the approved spec. So how can they go back and push back on their supplier if the supplier didn't even really know what the spec was?
Right. There's no
So
accountability.
there's so many use cases when it comes to really understanding what your specs are that historically like just haven't risen up to the level of like the CFO or the CEO. But it's just like if you're not doing it now, like you're just missing out, and your competitors are going to start to beat you on efficiency and EBITDA. They're just you can be so much more agile if you understand all of your data.
Yep. Totally agree. All right, cool. So I'll put websites and resources in the show notes. And then if you have more questions about how SpecRight could help you leverage your data, I will also put Zach's contact information in the show notes. And thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Zach.
Thanks, Jessica.
Yep.